Hi, I'm Mike Williams. I know a lot of you at Thrive. Some of you I may not have met yet. It is a pleasure to be here this morning. Dustin asked me to share some of my story with you. Um, so I'll tell you that prior to meeting Jesus, I was married, had a daughter, and was living a life that was very self-focused. My wife and I talk about at the time we had a list of each of us had a list of things on the refrigerator that we wanted in life. And they were all material things, right? Just kind of a ridiculous list. Um, Thankfully, after Jesus, that list came down. But I was working in East York at a place that no longer exists for Koenig and Bauer Atkin Gesellschaft, which was a German company that bought the modern newspaper press company. And I was working as a U.S. steelworker, so a union steelworker. Um, I don't know if you've ever been in a steelworking shop. It is dirty as that steel is cut, as it is worked, as it is sanded. It lets out a fine black dust that gets all over your clothes, all over your hands. It gets in every pore of your body. It's in your shoes. When you get in your car, it will rub against the seat of your car and make it messy. It was just a very dirty place. And it was dirty spiritually as well. It was a dark place. Most of us, myself included, right? I had pictures of my daughter in my toolbox. So, like, we see the toolbox open. There was a picture of my daughter, but there was also a picture of a girl in a bathing suit in there, right? And all the guys had pictures like that, and some of them very explicit in their lunchbox. It was just a dark, depraved kind of place, with the exception of one guy, a guy named Dave. And Dave just was different. His clothes were dirty. He had a nice, crisp blue uniform every day that he wore. He was happy no matter what the circumstances around us were. He maintained a positive, cheerful attitude. His tools were always clean. His toolbox was clean. His tool area, I mean, his entire working area was clean. And it was just nice to talk to him because he didn't drag you down those negative paths. So nice that I, as a young man living without Jesus at that point, noticed a huge difference between Dave and every single other person in that workplace. So I went to Dave one day just because I couldn't stand it anymore. I'm like, how do you do it? And he's like, how do I do what? And I'm like, how do you work here without letting it get all over you? Right? Whether the dirt isn't touching you, you're cursing like everyone else is cursing. How do you live that differently? How does it not affect you? And he said, that's a really good question. Why don't you come to church with me on Sunday and see? And I'm not sure if we went that exact Sunday or a few Sundays later, but we did eventually. We went on Mother's Day, 2001. My wife Deb and my daughter Samantha and I went, and I met Jesus that very first Sunday of attending church. Recognized just how far I was off the mark. And so that was a big change. Deb came to Christ not long after, Sammy as well. And so that's when that list came down off the refrigerator because we realized how ridiculous it was. And that was a big change. And it all was because at work, he was different. He wasn't, I don't, proselytizing, right? He didn't have a Bible in his hand. He wasn't, playing Christian music on his phone. He didn't have Christian bumper stickers on his car. He didn't have, you will be judged at the end of time everywhere. Or he wasn't beating people over the head with his Christianity, but he was screaming it with every action. And it was just a beautiful thing. Yeah. So that's how I got introduced to Jesus. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful story since then.
Awesome. Follow-up question to you.
Yes.
20 plus years later, you're following Jesus and you're working in a workplace, what are ways you have found have been ways that you can apply the attitude of Christ to your work?
You know, I'm not, there are a couple of verses that I want to talk about in that case. And either I would like to say it's Galatians 5:22, the fruits of the Spirit with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, or it's just the verses that Paul had in Corinthians about love. Um, Having Christ work allows me to love people that are sometimes acting in unlovable ways. Not everybody at our workplace is a Christian. It's not a requirement to be a Christian to work there. And sometimes it is difficult to watch people make destructive choices or mistreat other people, and not, to correct those behaviors, but to not let it flavor or color your image of them so much that you can't continue to pursue and maintain a relationship. So without Christ, there's no way that I could be able to do that and to help others demonstrate that love, patience, joy at work.
Yeah, so we talked about how people build a wall between secular and sacred, and there's church me and there's work me, and sometimes they're not the same person, because of when I'm at church and I'm around church people, but then I go to work and man, it is hard, it's tough. What would you say, like just three little thoughts that you would encourage somebody if they would tear down that wall and be holistic and say, I want to apply Jesus to every part of my life and not have a secular me and a sacred me. What would just be three starting points for somebody who maybe recognizes they need to try to start doing that?
I'd say one of the starting points would be to let go of the fear of judgment. Right? If you think you have to act a certain way at church, you're either in the wrong church or you have the wrong idea. If you have a church you that is different than the regular you, or the work you, then that's a starting point that you need to look at. Why do I feel I need to have a church me? And just really start evaluating there. I would say a time of prayer, as you are maybe going into work and going into church, right? You're going into there just to help separate that, to figure out what the difference is. And two would be to realize that you don't have to, it's not that you have to take, just trying to figure out how I want to say it. I find myself experiencing from so many folks who have a churchy presence that when they talk about sharing Christ, it's really, they're talking about preaching or even like street preaching or proselytizing all the time. And I don't think that that's necessary, right? We were called to love and make disciples. And not that those other things are bad, but I think there's a time and a place, and it's not 24 hours a day with your coworkers, because eventually they will not like you. is my thought. That was that three thoughts, or was that only two? I think that was three.
Yeah, I think you hit three. Last question. You started out working and you've worked through the process. You put a lot of sweat equity in. You're now at a position of leadership at your company, and you do a lot of interviews and you meet people. And what, like on Mike's radar, when you're interviewing somebody, you're talking to a future hire. What are things that that should shine through in an interview, like that a Christian should have, right? So if the Holy Spirit's in them and they're living out these commands that Jesus gave, can you pick up on things before like somebody says, I'm a Christian, or like, do you see Jesus in them before they even identify as being a Christian as you would go through an interview?
I would say that that is 100% the fruits of the Spirit, right? Fruits of the spirit do not include grumpiness and backbiting and holding grudges, right? So during an interview, when I am talking, even if you had a bad work situation, um, if someone is going off the rails to tell you about all the other people and how awful they were, right? That's not, I can't necessarily say that makes them a Christian or doesn't make them a Christian, right? Because I certainly am failing all the time, and I would hate if my life was in a bubble and someone was judging all of my actions, going, "Is he really a Christian?" Um, but you know, keeping that sense of joy, that sense of patience with other people who are kind, right? You can just feel kind people. They hit different than people who are doing their own things for their own self-interest, right? You can feel that when you are interviewing someone and you feel that all their questions are about me, 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 me. What are you going to do for me? What is this job going to do for me? Those sorts of things, and not necessarily, gosh, how can I fit into this community? Make a how can I be a part of this? I mean, I think that Galatians 5:22, the fruits of the spirit, is an excellent way to see which fruit is good and which fruit is rotten.
Yeah. Awesome.